No, it's that's it. They never mention it. I'll actually make sure I talk to them about it because I can do with knowing when it is. Well, yeah, it's in case they have it on, then it'll be easy for them. Yeah.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the South Planning Committee here at Shire today. We're not expecting a fire drill. In the event of the alarm sounding, please leave the building and gather at the front of the building. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Could I ask you to please ensure your mobile phone is all switched off? In order that those watching the live stream know who is speaking, the members and officers introduce themselves prior to speaking. To ensure that members of the committee and all points raised by the public speakers are properly heard, I must advise you I will not tolerate any disruptive behaviour. This meeting is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting, and if such behaviour takes place and persists, I will adjourn the meeting. I shall now ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves.
Councillor Nick Hignett, Councillor for Ray Valley Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall, I'm the member for Broseley.
Okay. Nigel Lumley, Councillor for Albrighton. Richard Marshall, member for Worfield Division.
Councillor Hilary Love, member for Church Stretton and Craven Arms.
Andy Boddington, member for Ludlow North.
Nigel Harting, Clem Division.
Richard Huffer, Councillor for Oxley Division.
Tony Parsons, Councillor for Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton.
Christian Lee, Councillor for Bridge North East and Astley Abbots.
I'm David Evans, Councillor for Church Stretton and Craven Arms, and I'm the chair of this committee.
I'm Tim Rogers, I'm Interim Planning and Development Services Manager.
Graham French, Principal Planner.
Kim Brown, Solicitor.
Right, we have apologies for absence, please.
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of July 2020. Could I have a proposal for the minutes to look through record, please? Thank you. Take the poll in favour. Thank you. Public questions?
No public questions, Chair.
Thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, please. Anyone got pecuniary interest? I just got, as I'm a local member for item number 6 at Hazel Road, Church Stretton. I will not have any part of that debate. I'm the chair to my vice chair and Nick Hignett, and I will leave the room. Councillor, please.
I'm also Councillor for Church Stretton Craven Arms, so number 6, I will leave the room.
Thank you. Right. Item number 5 on the agenda is Builders Leisure Site, Telford, Shropshire. Tim, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There's a number of late representations which I'll come back to in a few moments. I'll just take you briefly through the application and the application site, because it is a site which has been before you as a committee on 2 previous occasions. You have, I think, in total 3 reports, kind of the latest update report, the update report that was presented to you in May, and then the original report. Forgive me, I can't really remember the date that was originally presented to committee, but basically the deferral from the main committee was on the basis that members were still concerned about the highway implications of the proposed development and wanted the applicants to carry out a road safety audit, and also to consider, I think it was referenced in the meeting, the possibility of kind of a one-way system utilising the access on Kilboss Bank. So if we can just I'll run through the slides quickly. That's the application site. As you can see, kind of southwest corner is at the bottom of that plan is the access track winding its way up to the larger, wider application site. Significant slope on the site, upwards from south to north, or downwards now, north to south, down to the road, the Buildwas Bank Road, which runs along the southeastern boundary there. If you could go to the next slide, please, Tim. So that was the application as it was previously proposed. So you think up in the top, the northern part of the site, where all the caravans and lodges, and you'll see kind of the lighter coloured elements around in the central part of the southern half of the site there, which were the touring caravan plots. You will see from the report that those touring caravan, or the touring caravan element of the application has now been deleted, and the application is purely static caravans and holiday lodges. So they total 106 static caravans and 48 lodges in total. So if you just move on to the next slide. Yeah, perhaps the best sequence of plans, but members will recall that plan from the last application. There are improvements to the proposed to the point of access off the highway, and also visibility displays, more of which I'll come on to shortly. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So that's the landscape mitigation plan, which the updated one, which shows and is also the site plan, which shows the lodges and the static caravans in the southern part of the site rather than the touring caravans. As you see, the northern part of that site is, I think, where it's flatter, is more comprehensively developed proposal than the southern part. There were also ancillary facilities, kind of a reception area and etc., the details of which aren't included in the current application. They would be the subject of a further application. We can just move through those slides very quickly, Tim. So that shows the layout in a bit more detail in the caravans, the lodges in the lower part of the site in a bit more detail. And again, that's just the sections to show you how significant that slope is through parts of the site. You know, there is without doubt a significant gradient on the site throughout the site as a whole. We can move forward, Tim, please. That plan shows the location of the proposed new roundabout to be constructed in association with the Harworth developments on the former power station. It is quite close to the axis, as you see there, and again, it's referred to in the report and referred to in the road safety audit. Some of the road safety audit, as I'll explain again a little bit further, did identify some issues with the site access, some of which are in the control of the applicant. And I think that's led to the change with the touring caravans, but some will be and should be controlled through the final design of that roundabout ultimately. Okay, that's just a plan which shows kind of the excavation of the bank that for the access road up to the site. We can move on. I think you've seen these from the previous meetings. That's the access as it currently exists, and the view from the access, the view east there from the point of access. Next one, Tim, please. That shows the view in the opposite direction. That is a view into the site from the access on the Buildwas Bank itself. So that's the access which members asked to be looked into as a kind of a means of a separate means of access into the site, or secondary access. But for the reasons as set out in the report, the applicant considers that the use of that access is not appropriate. but it does show you the site beyond, and again, highlights the slopes on the site. Move on to, please. There you go, looking, that's from the Buildwas Bank site looking northwest. And a view of the site, an aerial view of the site, as you can see, kind of it's already a partial kind of partly developed and partly scarred, if you like, or evidence of the other uses on the site there off the Buildwas Bank. There have been kind of uses on the site under permitted development rights previously. We move on. So there's a faint red line there that shows that just shows the extent of the site as it will sit in the landscape. It shows the full width of the development site as you would see it from a number of viewpoints. I would say the applicants have also updated their landscape and visual impact assessment, and as has been raised previously or stated previously, the council have had that assessed and don't consider there to be a significant landscape impact. Again, you'll see the red line which indicates the extent of the application site, and the red line again. So you can see it will see you can see looking south through the site to Buildwas beyond. Okay, I think that's it through the plans. Is it Tim? Is that the last one?
Oh, sorry.
Members will recall at the last meeting that there was some debate at the adjoining landowner to the west was indicating that the development was going to impinge onto their property. As I said then, and it's completely the same now. If that is to be the case, and were the development to require the use of third-party land, and those third-party landowners were not willing to cooperate in the development proceeding, then, and it couldn't be constructed in accordance with the approved plans, then it clearly couldn't be developed. So whilst it's been raised as an issue, that's actually a civil matter between the parties involved. It's also relevant now because since the last committee meeting, it's been discovered that the council own land to the east of the application site, not all of which is in the highway, but may be affected by the visibility displays to the development. So the applicants have now served notice on the council as a landowner potentially affected by the development. And again, if the council were to see fit and it was required, the land was required for a visibility display, and we weren't prepared to grant that authority, then that would be a means of prevent, what would mean that it couldn't take place in accordance with the approved plans again. But again, that's a separate matter to what you're being asked to consider today. The visibility displays are considered to be adequate to allow an access in that location. Okay. No, I'm nearly finished, but I just wanted to refer you to the late representation sheet. You will see there's a number of late representations relating to this particular item. Firstly, one from the agent there, where they've confirmed that notice has been served on the council. They've asked that condition 3 be amended. We'd already picked that up. Condition 3 had been carried forward from the previous submission and referred to, included reference to mobile touring caravans. That clearly that shouldn't be the case. So we've recommended an amendment to condition 3. You will also see comments there from Claire Wild, the local member, referencing the fact that there's an SPD being drawn up to cover the World Heritage Site, and that, in her opinion, the application should be deferred until that SPD has been completed. She's also raised the issues of the ownership around the visibility displays. recommending a condition, or an amendment to condition 5, so it particularly reference static caravans and lodges to avoid any potential confusion or challenge to the occupancy condition. I think it just referred to caravans previously, and the concern was that they might, if the condition was carried forward as it was, there might be a temptation to say that the lodges, if they weren't specifically referenced in the condition, weren't subject to the condition, even though all of the structures, like caravans, static caravans or lodges, are designed to meet the definition of a caravan. And finally, then on the late rep sheet, you will see there is a comment there from the council's planning policy and strategy manager, just clarifying the point with regard to the SPD and why we don't consider that we should be either deferring the application or giving that forthcoming SPD any significant weight at this stage in the determination. I think, Chair, that's me done for the time being, but of course happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. We now have 2 speakers on this. There's Mark Thorne, local resident. If you'd like to come forward, sir, please. It's the right-hand button on the microphone, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Mark Thorne. I'm a resident of Leighton and Eaton Constantine, as well as being the Vice Chair of the Parish Council. At the last Planning Committee meeting, we objected to this application. Our reason? This development will inevitably increase the existing traffic safety issues on B4380 through Buildwas, Leighton and on to Shrewsbury. We note that Buildwas Council raised exactly the same issue when they objected to the application. For brevity, I will not go into the details of existing traffic safety issues on the B4380 through Buildwas and Leighton. Suffice to say, this traffic safety problem on the B4380 is well known to Shropshire Council, the police and the Camera Safety Partnership. So much so that traffic calming for Leighton was designed by Shropshire Council in 2017. Whilst we're told this is a priority case, nothing has been forthcoming on this traffic calming since then, apparently due to funding constraints. Not surprisingly, this issue has continued to grow since then. Last year, this ongoing traffic safety concern on the B4380 through Leighton was one of the major issues with the Harworth application. Committee members may recall that after considerable pressure, Harworth committed to providing a partial solution to the increasing traffic safety issue. As a parish, we're very appreciative of the support of the council officers and the planning committee in achieving that positive outcome. The planning condition for the Harworth development requires them to construct build-outs at either end of Leighton Village, no later than construction of the 50th house on Ironbridge Power Station site. However, whilst this condition is welcome, it's only part of the traffic calming that was designed by Shropshire Council in 2017 and is likely to be several years before this is built. Now we have this new application which will increase traffic by a further 1/6. This will inevitably exacerbate the existing issues. Yet there is nothing in this application about mitigating this further impact from the development. In fact, it's not even considered. As a parish council, we're also extremely disappointed this was not specifically addressed in the updated planning officer's report. This is despite both Buildwas and their own parish council raising objections on these grounds. This traffic safety issue on the B4380 through Leighton therefore remains unaddressed and unresolved. Our ask is simple. If this application is approved, please can the planning committee impose the following 2 conditions in mitigation of the increased traffic safety issues. Number 1, construction and related traffic shall not use the B4380. We note this condition is also applied to the Harworth project. Number 2, that the applicant contributes a sum of £10,000 to enhance the traffic mitigation measures in Leighton Village. This sum is proportionate to the cost of the traffic mitigation committed by Harworth. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Thorne? No? Thank you very much, sir. And now as for Amy Edison, who is the agent for the applicants, please. Okay, Amy, you've got 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of this application.
As you know, this is the third time that we have come back to planning committee now after 2 previous deferrals for additional information. During the last meeting, members raised concerns about the traffic impact from cars and touring caravans waiting within the highway to turn into the site. We have now removed all the touring caravan pitches from the development, and they've been replaced with 48 lodges and 106 static caravans. The omitted 32 touring pitches have been replaced with 9 lodges and 23 statics. This has kept the overall number of units the same across the site. We have orientated the new statics to follow the contours of the land and have provided parking for 2 cars on each plot, as is the case across the site. The removal of the touring pitches means that no cars will be waiting within the highway to access the site, as was raised by members at a previous meeting. This has resulted in a reduction in the amount of space needed to facilitate the access point into the site and passing places. We are aware that queries have been raised regarding land ownership in and around the access. In order to prevent any further delay in the determination of the application, we have served notice on the council. The legalities of land ownership, however, fall outside the planning process and are a civil matter. Therefore, the determination of the application can proceed. Shropshire Council Highways raised no objection to the proposal. We have commissioned an independent road safety audit as members requested, and this has confirmed that the Bilborough Leisure Development and Harworth Ironbridge redevelopment can both operate without impacting significantly upon the other. Senior Highways Officer Gemma Lawley has been in full consultation with us and doesn't raise any objection. With regard to the second access point onto Bilborough Bank, I need to stress to you all that this access is not to be considered as part of the development at all. It is for emergency use only. The access is onto a crawler lane up the bank and therefore unsuitable in highway safety terms for regular use. It was previously used by the 4x4 track. However, the 4x4 track operated under permitted development under the 28-day rule and was exempt from planning control. It cannot be considered as an alternative or second access point to this development, so please can you discount it from your minds. We have significant interest from a local firm, Evolution Homes and Leisure, who are interested in purchasing the site. They are a local firm, employ local people and manufacture park homes, lodges and static caravans. This scheme would generate a significant amount of local employment and input into the local economy, whilst enhancing the choice of holiday accommodation within this popular tourist destination. Can I please draw members' attention to the conclusion within the committee report under section 7. Each paragraph concludes that the proposal is supported by planning policy, landscape and heritage interests, highway and transport matters, economic objectives and the rural economy by providing high quality visitor accommodation and leisure facilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions? No? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, committee. We'd like to go first. Councillor Parsons, please.
This is an application that, as we've already heard, has been before us on a number of occasions. And whilst originally I wasn't particularly enthralled by the prospect of this development, what I think it's fair to say is that each time we have raised concerns in this committee, the applicant has sought to make changes, and the fact now that there won't be the potential for vehicles towing caravans turning into the site, because I think that has now been withdrawn from the application, that will help. It won't cure, but it will help some of the traffic issues that we have considered previously. I think that the 2 conditions that the parish council spokesperson came forward with here are worth looking at, because the construction traffic can certainly use the A roads down the bank rather than the B road going through Leighton. So if that can be added to it, then I'd be prepared to support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm absolutely astounded with Highways, if I'm honest, that they're looking at this and they're saying there's going to be no impact at all. I think they're looking at it in isolation as a development in its own right. When we look at it, we've got the Harworth development that's over 1,000 houses. That's going to potentially give us another 1,500 cars coming into the area. We've now got 214 mixed between static caravans and 48 lodges, which, as the agent just said, there's 2 cars per plot. If we're working that that'll only be 1.5 cars, that's another 321 potential car movements, especially on changeover day. Now, even though I'm a great believer in the rural economy, some weight was put on the employment opportunities by the agent. I think it's fair to say at the moment one of the hardest things in the world to do is to actually get employees for positions that are available. So we are in an enviable position that employment probably isn't necessarily the biggest thing at the moment. I do fear as well what we're doing to this area, and I think we've all got to look at ourselves a little bit with this, planning officers and members of the planning committee. We've got a World Heritage site right alongside there, and even though the SPD that's going through isn't anything to do with this application, we have got a UNESCO World Heritage site. We've also got an area of outstanding natural beauty just alongside it. And with the Harworth development, we're sticking 1,000 odd homes there. We're now turning this into a holiday park. I just think we've got to take a look and ask realistically, can we, with all consciousness, decimate this area any more to what it was, to what it's going to become over the next 15 to 20 years?
Thank you. Councillor Lumley, please.
Yeah, at the second meeting, i.e. the last one for this, I wanted to raise sustainability, but the officer said that had been resolved at the first meeting. So I'm not sure that my colleague on my left can now bring up that and issues around that, when my understanding is that this went off purely for the traffic. And if we say that it went off for the traffic, then that was specifically, and it was for me, about the matter of caravans, being a keen caravaner. I wasn't comfortable with it. Certainly when the roundabout's built, I think it'd be better. So I actually am going to support this.
Okay, thank you. The other speakers, please. Councillor Luck, please.
I am in agreement with Nigel, Councillor Lambie. I feel that it was around the caravans and the towing of the caravans previously. I also think if we could bring in those 2 conditions that the local parish mentioned, I would support this application now.
Thank you. Welcome back to you.
I've got a bit of a concern around the conditions without some involvement and input from and discussion with highways. I don't know that access particularly well. I don't know whether it's suitable for the construction traffic, or whether it's better for the construction traffic than the access for the main access for the site itself. So I hear what members are saying, but without some discussion with both the applicants and the and with highways, I don't think we could say categorically that we could impose that condition at this point. And secondly, the financial contribution, I fully understand and appreciate kind of the desire and the request for that and the reasons for that. But again, in order to include that as a condition, it would have to meet the test for a condition, and it would have to be necessary to make the development acceptable. And what you have before you is a road safety audit, which has been done since the last meeting and assessed by our highways and by the applicant's own agents. It was done independently from the agents who were the agents for the application itself, and they're saying that the impact won't be so severe that makes it unacceptable. So if it's not severe as it currently stands, how can we then require a contribution to improve things? Because I don't think that meets the test.
Okay, if we didn't want those conditions, can we delegate that condition to the officers?
I think if you are happy to do so, you can delegate that we certainly investigate whether it's reasonable to impose that condition.
It's in condition 8.
Councillor Parsons, next, please.
Routing of vehicles to and from the site is in condition 8 of the conditions.
There is a requirement for it, but that doesn't say that it will be that access.
No, but it gives the
It
officers.
gives the option.
Gives the officers to.
Yes.
Councillor Parsons.
I think my understanding, and I may be wrong, was that the point being raised by the parish council was that the construction traffic shouldn't, if you like, head from Shrewsbury through Roxeter, Leighton and whatever down the B road. I don't think the fact that it becomes a B road just before the normal entrance into the site is the issue. I think it will come down the A road, the bank. It might just get onto the B road before it turns into the premises at in the normal entrance and exit. I don't think they're looking to reopen the exit and entrance halfway up the Buildwas Bank.
You see, in essence, yeah. Is that what you were thinking?
Yes, just to clarify, we're talking about the stretch which runs from where the roundabout will be,
Yes.
going to the west, through Buildwas, going through Leighton and on to Shrewsbury. That is the stretch we're talking about, which is actually, it was talked about at length in the Haworth application as well. Exactly the same stretch was one of the issues we discussed at that time. And on the Haworth application, as far as I was aware, it was a very clear condition which says the traffic would not, the construction traffic would not go up that road.
So you weren't seeking to have the construction traffic using the access off the Buildwas Bank, it was just the
It wasn't
direction.
directly to do with the access itself, it was more to do with the consequent issues down the way.
Well, that, I mean, again, it will be covered, you're right, that can be covered in the discussion around the discharge of condition A. I should just mention at this point that in terms of the conditions, one of the conditions proposed does require that the access and the visibility are provided before any other development takes place. So just to reiterate that point, again, if it's not possible for the applicants to do that, you know, the rest of the development won't progress because it's a requirement that they do that first. Thank you.
Councillor Lumley, did you want to come back? No. Councillor Love, did you want to come back? Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak? Right, can I have a proposer, please, by the way? Councillor Parsons,
Yeah, I'll propose that it's accepted with those conditions.
thank you. Seconder, Councillor Lumley. Can take the forward and against, please. Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry for Hepburn.
The conditions, condition A will require us to agree the routing and the construction, so.
The delegate, the kitchen.
But
Yeah.
I want it clear that you're not saying that you are requiring the financial contribution.
No, it's just, the first
The
condition.
first condition, okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if you just indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal. Caroline Bagwell,
for,
Andy Boddington,
For.
Nigel Harting,
Four.
Nick Hignett,
For.
Richard Huffer,
For.
Christian Lee,
Four.
Hilary Love, Nigel Lumbey,
For.
Richard Marshall,
Abstain.
Tony Parsons,
For.
and David Evans.
Four.
That's 10 for 1.
Okay. 10 for 1 abstention, so that is carried. Thank you. Right, we go to item 6, and I'll hand that over to the Vice Chair. Please.
Okay, thank you, committee. Item 6 on the agenda then is the new dwelling, Cedar House, suggested 11's Hazelwood Road, Church Stratton. I'll hand over to Officer Woodward.
Thank you. This is another application which has been before members previously. If you remember, it's as the road in Church Stretton, and it's for an application for erection of a detached garage. And members were concerned about the need for, I think, for the need for vehicles to back out onto the highway, and wanted further clarification or investigation of whether it was possible to avoid that. So what you have before you is kind of a supplementary report detailing the fact that we have gone back to the applicants for them to try and address the concerns of the committee identified by the committee, and the report sets out sections 2 and 3, why the applicants have responded as to why they think they are unable and unwilling to alter the proposal. So it's essentially the same application. So if I just take you through the slides, Tim, please. So that's the application site, the dwelling right in the centre of it, and the proposed garage in what's essentially the northern part of that site, shaded grey on that plan. So you'll see if we move forward. So as you'll see, it's a single garage with a store on the end, but it does require that the vehicles will either back off the highway or onto the highway to access the garage. Yeah, there's not much more to say other than that. I think it was previously pointed out that there are other properties along the road that have a similar arrangement where it's necessary to back onto or off the highway. But that addendum report is very short. Officers still consider that essentially the proposal is acceptable in terms of highway safety, and therefore the recommendation remains the same. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I understand no speakers on this? No. So we go straight to members' debate then, please. Yes. Councillor Harden.
Yeah, thank you. Still disappointed, I suppose, that it's come back with, with no alterations being made. It's essentially the same as before. And we did have sort of discussions, I remember, on site with the owner when we had a look at it on the site visit. So I can see why the officers still feel that it is acceptable, because, as has just been pointed out, there are other properties in the area that do use vehicles backing out onto the road. I still can't quite follow the rationale behind why they're deciding that they can't do so. But I'll wait to see what other members have said before making a final decision. I'm not inclined to support it as it currently stands, but we'll see where we go.
Councillor Lumley.
We've had a few of these before us committee-wise. There's certainly one in Bridgenorth where we were dead against cars reversing to the road, and that seems to be a general premise. The fact that older houses have got drives where they reverse on, two wrongs don't all of a sudden make a right. Looking at that, just behind the proposed garage is an area of land there. Is that just grass? Couldn't they make a turning circle there? I haven't had the advantage of a site visit at all.
It was to do with trees.
Oh, it's the trees.
Rootings.
Yeah, but we allow houses so that they can have the two parking spaces, and then all of a sudden you want to put a garage on it. Most people don't use the garage for a car within a very short space of time, so they're going to have to put the car somewhere else. So at the moment, unless I'm saying otherwise, I can't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, I really don't have an issue with this at all. The issue I had at the last planning meeting was the trees. They've been there a hell of a lot longer, and the fact the garage goes in, it now decimates and kills the tree, which was my concern. I think if we look at it, just driving here today, how many houses we pass where they're not afforded the luxury of a turning place in front of their house. One way or another, you back either on or off the drive, and I think that's probably the vast majority of houses. I'm fortunate, I live in a fairly large house, but I haven't got a turning point at the front. I have to back onto the drive and then I back off again, whichever, either or. So to be fair, I just think it is what it is. There's not space to turn a car, and it would be, a massive property if it was, so I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons.
Yeah, I think I will as well. I think there is a distinction here about, there is an issue obviously where people are reversing onto a road, and the example given in Bridgenorth, is one that I couldn't support, because that was backing out onto a busy V road, the main road from Ludlow into Bridge North. This is not of that sort of level of traffic, in my opinion, and therefore I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington.
Thank you, Chair. Very similar, really, that I think the level of traffic on this road is such that we do not have to be that concerned about traffic reversing onto it. I mean, it's not ideal by any means, but it is a constrained site. It is constrained by the trees, and in my view, I think we should approve it.
Thank you. Yes, having attended the site visit at the last committee meeting, this road isn't busy like the road that Tony was referring to in Bridge North. I don't have any problems supporting this application. Okay, can I have a proposal then, please? Everybody's, yes. Yeah, you're voting. So you're proposing. Okay, seconder, Councillor Boddington. Okay, I have a proposal and a seconder. I'll to our solicitor to take a vote, please.
Okay, we've got proposal and seconded to accept the officer recommendation. If you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
Nigel Harton.
Against.
Richard Heffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Nigel Lumbey.
Against.
Richard Marshall.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
And Nick Hignett.
For.
So we've got 7 for and 2 against.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Nick. Item number 7 there is proposed development of former Ironbridge Power Station, report seeking onward delegation. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. So members will recall that this application went back to committee on 3 separate occasions, concluding with an approval resolution in September of 2021. A lot of work has gone on with the legal agreement since then, and we're now at a position where that is about to be completed, so the decision will be issued shortly, within the next week possibly. There's an associated minerals scheme and also a memorandum of understanding with Telford and Wrekin Council. Now, under the Council's constitution, it's not possible to take onward delegation from another local authority such as Telford and Wrekin on a cross-boundary application unless there's an express approval, and the relevant decision body is this committee in this case. So when the application is permitted in maybe a week or so's time, we can immediately expect to receive reserved matters application for phase 1 of the Ironbridge development, around 75 homes. Additionally, we can expect a significant package with discharge of conditions on the application, which had around 80 conditions, I think, if I recall correctly. Now, what we don't want is for that application package to go to Telford and Wrekin. That would lead to confusion. Telford and Wrekin, in making their decision, have recognised that there are benefits in giving onward delegation to Shropshire Council in order to ensure that a single application is submitted for each reserved matters and for any discharge of conditions associated with it, and that is determined by Shropshire Council as the lead authority. So this report, it doesn't seek any approval for any additional development or any such in relation to the Ironbridge proposal. It simply seeks this committee's approval in order to accept onward delegation from Telford and Wrekin, so that the only decision taken in relation to the future applications for Ironbridge Power Station taken by Shropshire Council as the lead authority, but of course in detailed conversation and in full consultation with Telford and Wrekin Council. So really that's all I want to say on this one. I just the recommendation is to accept the onward delegation from Telford and Wrekin Council.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak on that? No? Do I propose from the chair that we accept the delegate recommendation? Seconded by Councillor. So, do you take the, yes, please?
Okay, so we've got a proposal and a seconder to accept the recommendation to accept the onward delegation from Telford and Wrekin. If you could indicate whether you're voting for or against, please. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
Nigel Harton.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Hilary Love. For. Nigel Lumbey.
For.
Richard Marshall.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
And David Evans.
For.
Okay, so
That's unanimous. Thank you. Item number 8 is proposed agricultural workers dwelling south of Corton Farm, Corton, Shropshire. This is that you? No, great. Yeah.
Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so we visited this site this morning, at least some of us did. What we see in the little red triangle at the bottom is the location of the proposed agricultural workers dwelling. In the northwest of the site, you'll see the farm buildings complex at Corton Farm, poultry unit with some potato and such like. There is one existing agricultural workers dwelling which is towards the left-hand side of the page, and that building. There's additionally the main farm building, which is also sort of towards the centre of the farm buildings complex. I will have the next slide now. Thank you. So what is proposed is a third building to support the activities in the farm. This is actually envisaged as a retirement building for the farmer who's currently there, Mr. Povell, who will at some stage hand over the reins to his son, and that will allow the enterprise to continue. Now, the council's supplementary planning document on type and affordable housing allows this to happen. It specifically recognises that there may be circumstances in which an older farmer might wish to hand on the reins to their son or daughter, and that in such circumstances there can be a benefit in allowing additional property to be constructed to allow continuity, so that the old ways are sort of passed on and developed. So I think in terms of principle that's there, but the key element is it must revert to an affordable property in the event that its use as an agricultural retirement, or partly retirement, partly sort of workers dwelling at the moment, was to fall at some future date. There are a couple of issues, however, that officers have with this. I think in terms of the general principles, we discussed that on site this morning, and clearly it's a well-run farm, and there needs to be a succession plan, and this in principle appears logical. However, as members noted, this site is located 200 metres to the south of the main farm buildings unit. Can we see the first slide again, please? So you see the main farm buildings complex in the northwest. This is sort of a bit spatially isolated from that. And one of the concerns that officers have is that this can lead, contrary to national policy, to isolated and sporadic development in the open countryside, and moreover within the AONB, the boundary which is defined by the Corvedale Road that we see to the south. So I think we'd have preferred it if it had been associated with the farm buildings complex itself, in order to sort of knock that potential concern off. The second issue which gives us concern is that there isn't any kind of formal succession strategy, no kind of legal document indicating intent for the reins on the farm unit to be passed over to the son, so we need, in accordance with policy MD 7A and the SPD on housing type and affordability, to have a kind of functional need, and we don't feel that the actual argument has been made up strongly enough in this particular case. The third issue that officers have concern about is that I mentioned to you with regards to the type and affordability SPD that the default situation is that if the property is to cease to be used for an agricultural purpose subsequently, it would default to an affordable property. Now, the SPD indicates that the area for an affordable property should not generally exceed 100 square metres. This property has an area of 120 square metres. The additional 20 square metres is identified as for an office and a boot room. Now, I think that in the absence of a clearly expressed functional needs, we cannot, for this sort of ongoing agricultural use, maybe further information could actually come by that might assist with that respect, but it does support further the concern in relation to the additional area over and above that of the 100 square metres required by policy. So in summary, therefore, Chair, the principle of succession is fine and is embedded in the supplementary documents, but we have concerns that the functional need argument hasn't been addressed for 3 properties for agricultural use there, and that the property is isolated from the parent farm buildings complex, and that the size of the property exceeds that which would be expected for reversion to an affordable unit in the event that the agricultural use should cease in the future. So whilst we accept the principle, we can't currently accept the detail, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I have 3 speakers on this. I've got David Hedgley for the Parish Council of Tilbury. And if you'd like to come and address the committee, 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Didley Parish Council, who along with local residents have mounted a vigorous opposition to further housing in Corfton and its environs. It must be noted though that this application, Didley Parish Council has supported it and there have been no adverse public comments on the planning portal. It would appear that what is at issue in this application is not that planning policy principles of development prohibited, but the interpretation by the planning officer of how relevant are the arguments that planning policy principles have been met by the applicant to justify passing it. As this is an outline application, it is the principle of whether a house could be built there rather than at this stage its projected size. Those issues can be met during a full planning application or other avenues for a boot room office explored if necessary. Didley Parish Council debated fully the criteria for the need of the applicant to live on the site and the retirement justifications. And based on first-hand experience of agriculturally employed councillors, reached the conclusion that the criteria set have been met for the applicant to be present at the business for the majority of the time. It looked at the need for the applicant to be close at hand to provide cover at night when the poultry manager was off duty or had a holiday, and took into consideration that arable farming was not a 9-to-5 job, but in southern months could involve 16+ hour days, as well as deliveries and collection of produce such as potatoes. The house also provided security near the farm's entrance and allowed the applicant to be close at hand to work with and guide his son as he gradually took over the running of this large, diverse farm business, whilst allowing his son to grow his family in his own home. Part of the drive for this is the ambition to hand the farm on as the applicant ages and his health deteriorates to his son. Just as the farm was handed on to him, it would be the 4th generation of the farm. There is no reason to doubt that this will not happen, or at this stage succession needs to be set in stone, as normal inheritance protocol is different to farms passing on in the family. As the planner emphasises that the building will be 200 metres from the main complex, it can hardly be described as being isolated, nor, on the other hand, too far away for easy access and foot. Anyone driving the Corfton part of the B4368 will see sporadic farm buildings, which are part of the charm of the Dale. Visiting the actual site, you would see that the applicant's house lies in a hollow shielded from the road by the bend in the drive, and in no way would affect nearby amenities or distract from the AONB. Didley Parish Council believes that the planning officer's interpretation of not meeting planning criteria is flawed and the benefits of the proposal do meet development plan policy criteria.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Mr. Secretary? No, thank you very much. We have a statement from Mr. Tina Motley, and we can read it again, please. Thank you.
Okay, this is an outline application in the AONB for an agricultural workers dwelling on a poultry and mixed arable farm. The farm entrance was moved and remodelled in 2016 when 4 broiler poultry sheds were installed. The site of the proposed agricultural workers dwelling lies on spoil land, not currently agricultural, but left over from the remodelling of the drive, halfway up the drive within the curtilage of the farm. There are currently 3 agricultural workers on the farm, one of whom manages the poultry sheds, and the other 2 are the applicant and his son, who live respectively in the farmhouse and in a 1-bedroom flat on the site. The other building mentioned is a farm diversification holiday let property. The applicant does not enjoy good health and wishes in time to hand the overall management of the farm to his son and enable his son to move into the main farmhouse so that he and his wife can move to the proposed agricultural workers dwelling and continue to live and work on the farm. The planning officer considers this application should be refused as it exceeds the size allowed for an agricultural workers dwelling, which would inhibit the potential for it to be transformed to an affordable house later. However, the extra space proposed, a boot room and an office, is a feature of such agricultural dwellings, and this is an outline proposal with all matters reserved, with scope to redesign at the full application stage. My understanding is that the full proposal will envisage a single-storey or dormer dwelling, which would not be overbearing in landscape terms, since it would be sunk into the bank and is not overlooked from any angle other than from the farmhouse and outbuildings. The proposed siting of this application would aid security, as it has a direct view of both the drive and the farm buildings. I would suggest it is inaccurate to describe the proposal as sporadic development in open countryside, as it clearly lies within the farm's immediate curtilage alongside the farm drive. One of Shropshire Council's stated aims in rural areas is to try and keep farming families together, and this application, if granted, would enable a smooth succession from father to son whilst enabling the applicant and his wife to remain on the farm. This seems to me to conform with the provisions in 6.1.9 of this report regarding the provisions of MD 7A over business continuity and farmers with a family connection, and also the SPD mentioned in 6.1.13 of the officer's report. In conclusion, I can see no overwhelming policy or material considerations advanced by the planning officer to prevent this outline application from progressing from the outline stage. Diddleby Parish Council is clearly supportive, and if passed, this will achieve the objective of keeping a farming family together, as well as facilitating intergenerational succession on an important farm in the Cordell. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kim. And now the agent called Nick Williams, and you're speaking on behalf of the applicant. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee, please, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members. This application is for an agricultural worker retirement dwelling to house Stephen Pogle, which will facilitate the handover of a large and complex farm business to his son, Thomas. He will live in the main farmhouse as a family home. The officer report recommends refusal for 3 reasons, but we believe this recommendation should be overturned subject to a section 106 of the agreement controlling the occupancy and affordability of the dwelling. The first reason for refusal states the dwelling will exceed size restrictions and policy. This is an outline application with design detail to be secured through reserved matters, and so this is not a relevant reason for refusal. Size can be determined at a later date. The first reason also states that a central need for an additional worker on site has not been demonstrated. This application is for an agricultural worker retirement home and not for an additional worker on site. This exact situation is supported by Shropshire Council's own type and affordability of housing supplementary planning document, which at paragraph 3.2 states, consideration may be given to business cases which support farmers with a family connection seeking to retire on the farm, if an advantage to business continuity can be proven. This is clearly the case here. Thomas is 28, is a partner and director of the farm business, so is clearly tied to the business for the long term, needs room for his household to grow while being on site and taking over the business under Stephen's watchful eye. It is vital Stephen remains on site also to pass on his wealth of knowledge to Thomas, who in time will take full control of the business. The second reason for refusal states the development would result in sporadic and isolated development in the countryside. Para 80 of the NPCF supports isolated homes in the countryside where there is an essential need for a rural worker, including those taking majority control of the farm business. This dwelling will allow Thomas to occupy the main farmhouse as his family home, allowing him to take majority control. The location of the dwelling on the farm drive is ideal, deterring intruders on the farm, adding much needed security for the poultry on site and expensive farm machinery. The location would be close enough to allow Stephen to support Thomas in covering chicken alarms, holidays and days off. The poultry enterprise requires 24/7 attention. The dwelling would be modest in size, would be set low in the landscape and would be far subordinate to the other Corfton farm buildings above. The third reason for refusal acknowledges the benefits of the proposal but states there is conflict with policy. But the proposal finds clear support in both Shropshire Council supplementary planning documents and the NPPF. There have been no objections to the proposal and the proposal is clearly supported by the local community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, please? No? Thank you. Right, the committee, please. Who'd like to speak first? Councillor Waddington.
Thank you, Chair. I feel we should support this proposal. The excess size is really in a sense of technicality, and there's enough flexibility in the SPD that would allow us to say, yeah, okay, the total is 120 square metres, but in this case, given that the extra area is associated with farm work and things that you need on a farm, then I think that's okay. I don't see this as being isolated and in the countryside. It's clearly part of the complex. I think it's close enough. Perhaps ideally if it's a little bit closer, but I don't think there's actually any problem with this proposal. So I'd like to go against the officer's recommendation and say I would like to support the application.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair. In many ways, I've been torn with this application because I read Mr. Povell's letter and I absolutely agree with everything that he's saying. But then I looked at the officer's recommendations and we have policies in place for a reason. However, I do think that the policies are open for interpretation and how they're looked at. And somebody that actually runs a family business, you know, I know how important it is to have that succession plan close by. And also from my elders who obviously I learned iCraft from. So I do feel, especially within farming, it's really, really important to have the father there to be able to mentor the son on the day-to-day operations of the business. Now, okay, it is said about how close it is to the main house. I actually don't feel it's a problem. I think we've got to be quite fair here. Thomas is going to have Dad over him 24/7 running the business. He certainly doesn't want him all over him 24/7 living in the house as well. So to have the house close enough to be able to aid and mentor, but far enough away so that Thomas can live his life as well. So when I'm looking at it and I'm looking at the policies and I'm looking at the reasons for refusals, I actually believe the reason for granting and going against the officers is stronger case, because I do think it's important to keep families together. And I think one of the things that we have to look at within planning is the way that we can keep community close and family close as well. So I'm in full agreement with Councillor Boddington and I will be supporting that we reject and we accept the application.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, listen to everything that's been said, and I do note the suggestion of an alternative site. But I believe that alternative site that's shown on the map, which is very close to the farm, is a bit too close to retirement. If you want a retirement, I would say that sort of site far enough away down the drive is actually an ideal site for it. One thing that I haven't seen in the report, and I think it's a reasonable point to bring up, is that the applicant at the moment lives in a one-bedroom flat. Now, if that one-bedroom flat is self-contained, and I don't know whether it is or not, but if it is self-contained, then surely in a way this actually makes more of a case for having a retirement dwelling, because it frees up a one-bedroom flat if it's self-contained. It could possibly be used by another worker or rented out to somebody local. So in many ways, very often when you build one dwelling, you free up another dwelling, and I know that's only a one-bedroom flat, but it's still feasible, I would say. Some good points were made by the agent, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Lumby, please.
I benefited from the site visit, and actually when we parked where the bungalow was going to be, I think that's too far away from the farm. It is isolated from it. I don't like the idea of retiring people off and then having them as guards for the security. I think they should be, personally, I agree with the principle of them having a place on the farm, and of the 3 dwellings, I'd have it just down from that left-hand dwelling, so that he would still be far enough away. He can get as involved as he likes, but he's got the security of his family being able to see his property as well. And then everything is already effectively 4 family or 4 dwellings there, albeit one's a rental. And another one that will be the cluster. I think it's too far away there. So at the moment, I'm thinking of not supporting this.
Councillor Harper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll stop. I'll wear my farmer's hat. Going back to the time when I've got a young family and was putting in an application into them district council for an agricultural restricted dwelling, the logical place for me was at the top of a long steep drive, and I think there's probably plenty of members here that have seen the access into the farm. Quite steep, winter months, pretty bad to access. It seemed logical to me that you put it close to the highway. But no, at that point in time, I was refused because they wanted it built on top of the silage pit. There needs to be some logic here. I think the business case has already been proven, and there's big changes coming ahead for agriculture, and should things change with an agricultural restriction, it would revert to an affordable. And surely common sense would dictate, if it's put out to somebody from outside the business, that they're not right on top of the farm. They're not, farms are going to go on working whatever policies your government dictates. We've also got the issue, I can tell you, farming as an industry will take the best years out of anyone, and often leave farmers with knees, hip replacements, like a good many other stressful industries. Now, I know the farmhouse. It's logical that they should be allowed to stay within the business, support the next generation, because they don't let go easy, but have the benefit to have something that is more manageable, maybe on single story, and leave the larger homestead to the growing family of the next generation. I believe this ticks all the boxes. We've heard from the local member. We've heard from the local parish council in support of this. I think that there's certainly a lot more pluses than getting into the technicalities of distance away from the main homestead. So if Councillor Boddington is happy to put a recommendation to support this application, I'm going to be happy to second that.
Okay. You want to back in? Please. Okay, I've got 3 more speakers.
No, I did.
I did.
You did.
No, I just wanted to say I haven't been heavily involved in this application. I'm here listening to the debate, and obviously I've seen the report, and I think fundamentally it does hang around the functional need for it. The second reason for refusal about it being sporadic and isolated is added because clearly officers didn't consider that the functional need was met. So if the functional need is met, then clearly a new dwelling in that location wouldn't be acceptable. You wouldn't allow a sporadic or isolated dwelling there. But if members do believe that the functional need is met, then that you may consider that falls away, particularly for the reasons that Councillor Huff just mentioned, in respect of, as it does revert to an affordable, you wouldn't expect it to be that closely integrated into the farm set, because it would make for a difficult relationship for somebody who's not directly involved in the farm. But it is that functional need, and we've heard that there are, I think, 3 dwellings on site. I haven't, as I say, haven't delved into the finer detail of. We've heard that the son occupies an annex. I think that the father occupies the main house. I think the third was the holiday let. I haven't seen the details as to why that holiday let isn't feasible as a potentially as a dwelling for the son. I just put that out there. But I do believe, and what I would say to members is that I think the decision here is clearly around the functional need, and if members are to support the application, you need to be clear that you believe that the functional test has been met. That's all.
Councillor Baker, please.
Thank you. I certainly believe that it should be made possible for people, for farmers who are retiring, to continue to live on site. I completely accept that, and I understand the need to be able to pass on the knowledge and expertise to further generations of their family. My issue, and again, I was fortunate to be able to go on the site visit this morning, is about the position of this proposed building. It looks to be some considerable distance from the main group of dwellings, and I understand that there is a possibility of a site closer to those dwellings being provided. In my mind, I think that would be more appropriate. I do feel that to build another dwelling effectively in the field on the other side of the farm track is, you know, spreading out rather too much into the local environment. I completely understand the wish to live independently from other members of the family. However, there is already one dwelling there that's used as a holiday let. So it's not that that they aren't sort of living closely to other people. I find it difficult to support this unless it were closer to the other dwellings.
Councillor Lott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am inclined to support this. I feel that the fact that it's at the bottom and the lower end of the drive will help with the security and for the increase of the risk of someone else, just to deter possible people coming up the drive, unwanted people coming up the drive. Also, the plot where they're putting it, which was mentioned earlier, is a bit of land that isn't actually used for anything at the moment. It's not used for any of the agriculture. It's part of where the old drive was. So it's sort of being put on wasteland, if you like, which will make use of that area. And yeah, I am inclined to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was also on the site visit this morning, and I understand the points being made by Councillor Bagnall and Councillor Lombe about the distance from the main grouping of the farm buildings. But I think on balance, you know, and this is going to be a retirement home for the person who's currently farming this land, and also the fact that it is well hidden. You don't see this build. You wouldn't see this building from the road. And the only place you might see it from is the bungalow in the next area, the beaches. But I don't think, on balance, that I would be opposing this. So I'm going to support it as well.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Yeah, just a quick one. I've heard the holiday let come up a couple of times now through the debate. I think we have got to completely put the holiday let to one side. Ultimately, that's already had its planning permissions. It's a revenue stream that comes into the overall business. So I don't think we can put any weight on the holiday let at all, because next we might be turning around and saying we've got to use one of the broiler sheds to house the sun, which is part of the business. So let's forget the holiday let.
Yeah. Councillor Lambie, please.
I just wanted to say, having heard what the officer said in regard to if the principle of it is that he has a retirement place is met, and let's not worry about the distance. In view of that, and specifically that, I'm going to be more supportive there.
Okay. Right. Personally, I think it meets all the functional tests, it meets all those. I think it's a good security system for the farm, because if you're parked at the end of the drive and she's coming up by, the son wants to move into the farmhouse and take it over eventually, and obviously you'll have a family in time, and perhaps the family will want to take over, so there'll be the fifth generation that's going to run the puzzle business. And I fully support this application. Councillor Bonington made the proposal. I'd just like him to come back with that proposal, and then with the second there, and then we'll ask Tim Rogers to come in there, and then move into the thing.
Yeah, if you don't mind, yeah, just before you do that, obviously, that's where it's heading to the vote. So just to make sure that you're, in doing so, if it is carried and is approved, that you're delegating to officers to draft the appropriate conditions and negotiate the 106 agreement requiring with regard to occupancy. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. So I propose that we go against the officer recommendation for refusal, and we support this application. The dwelling is sufficiently close to the farm and sufficiently distant to be sustainable when it becomes available in the future. There are clear grounds for the size of the building in a farming context. There is a clear functional link to the main farm complex. So we think it meets all the criteria, and yes, we will delegate to officers.
Okay, okay, you happy to second that? Okay, we'll now put it to the vote, thank you. We go against officer recommendation, allow the application for outline plan condition with delegation of the conditions to the officers. Okay?
That's okay, thank you. So if you could indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal, as the Secretary Chair. Caroline Bagnall.
Against.
Andy Boddington.
Sorry, what are we voting on? My agree with you. I think I'm in favour of it.
Nigel Harton.
Yes, 4.
Nick Ignett.
4.
Richard Huffer.
4.
Christian Lee.
4.
Henry Leff. 4. Nigel Lumbey.
4.
Richard Marshall.
4.
Tony Parsons.
4.
And David Owen.
4.
10 for 1 against.
10 for and 1 against, that we good carries, thank you. Does anybody want a contract break before we continue, or shall we continue? All right, right. With the Parkway Cottage now, Woodbank, Abden. There, there's a lovely trip up there.
Thank you, Chair. It was indeed a beautiful trip up into God's own country, towards the highest hill in Shropshire. So permission is sought for a change of use land, which is currently sort of agricultural, but at kind of low grade, to domestic garden land. Direction of a 3-bay detached garage with new vehicular access. So the proposed site is outside the curtilage of the associated dwelling, which is a kind of traditional stone cottage that you can see sort of towards the centre, towards the centre of towards the bottom of the picture. I think I'm just trying to get the angle right. So it's in a kind of topographic depression that we saw. I'm not sure if that slide is the right way round. Actually, that's what's confused me. It's a 3-bay garage, horizontally mounted timber boarded walls, plain clay tile pitched roof. Properties, obviously we saw it in a remote location. It's within the OMB. So the Parish Council, Abden and Heath, has appreciated that the size has been reduced, but are maintaining their objection that the site will be highly visible, both from the Nordy Bank ancient monuments, which we pointed out the location of that about 1.7 kilometres away, and also from within the OMB. So we've also got a steep access that's been indicated would require significant earthworks and spoil in order to obtain access down into the proposed locations, what they're saying concern. And that they're also indicating there's sufficient space for the garage to be within the existing curtilage of the property. No other consultative objections. Trees team has emphasised the need for sustainable landscape mitigation. I think we saw from the site visit this morning that the area is quite well surrounded by trees, except on one side where it sort of faces out to the wider landscape to the west, to the east. So in terms of principle, the additions to existing dwellings are acceptable under the type and affordability of housing supplementary planning documents. Proposals for detached outbuildings don't pose any fundamental policy conflicts. This is provided they're solely for ancillary domestic use and can be reinforced, and this can be reinforced by condition. So the SPD expects domestic additions to be sympathetic to the size, mass, character and appearance of the original dwelling and to local context. Other relevant, obviously the NPPF requires great weight to be given to protection of areas of outstanding natural beauty and also conserving heritage assets in their setting, as do the relevant policies in our development plan. So a similar application was refused at committee in 2019 and dismissed on appeal in 2020. However, that proposal was in a much more prominent location, elevated to the left of the access route, as we pointed out when we were on site this morning, and therefore was found to be harmful to the AONB, though the inspector actually found that there wouldn't be an adverse impact on the Nordy Bank scheduled ancient monument, 1.6 or so kilometres to the east. Latest application proposes the building to be seated much lower in a hollow, as we saw, close to the parent dwelling. Would be a substantial improvement, would negate any detrimental impact on the wider setting of the landscape in the ONB, could add a landscaping condition, secure further screening. The building has a simple rustic form that will allow vehicles to be stored under cover, which are currently visible in the open, although I'm not sure we saw them particularly visible when we were on site this morning behind the trees, but I presume there are times when they must be. So in conclusion, the principle of proposed building is acceptable as it's solely for ancillary domestic use, and officers consider that the revised lower level siting would ensure a visually acceptable development with no effects on the scheduled ancient monument or indeed on the AONB. So therefore, Chair, we are recommending approval.
Thank you.
Oh, can I just add to that, please? We met a gentleman on site who's a member of the parish council. I gather that members have received a circular from the parish council which has sort of identified their objections to the scheme on the basis of visual impacts and heritage. I understand from the councillor that was a majority vote passed to object on a 3-2 basis. I just wanted to clarify that to the committee. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Your statement we came to read out from Councillor Motley. That's all we got on this one. Yep, thank you.
Okay, Chair. This application for a 3-bay garage in a remote and sensitive location in the AONB facing the ancient monument of Nordy Ring has been refused by both the South Planning Committee and the Planning Inspectorate in the recent past. The new application, like its predecessors, comprises a 3-bay garage and a hard standing, but a new location is proposed at the bottom of a small valley, which would necessitate the removal of trees and shrubs to form a steep vehicular access and an increase in the domestic curtilage of the property. Members will note that Abden and Heath Parish Council is still not convinced that this new application will mitigate previous objections due to the steepness of the access and the fact that with some careful planning, space could be provided closer to the dwelling itself to accommodate garaging without needing potentially to spoil the view from Nordy Ring. Indeed, there is already an existing garaging space which has some work done to it close to the property. I would recommend that due to the sensitivity of this location within the AONB, careful consideration is given to the provisions in the NPPF and the SPD supporting CS11 in paragraph 6.2.1 by a condition which ensures that the use of the garages is solely for ancillary domestic purposes and preventing a change of use application for domestic accommodation. My main concern about this application, however, is that it should not in any way impact adversely on the exceptional scenic beauty of the AONB and the Shropshire Hills, either through its location or through the failure to clear spoil from the site, together with the necessity for appropriate materials to be used on the track down to the garages. and emphasis on sensitive landscaping. I would be most grateful, therefore, if appropriate conditions could be imposed to ensure the minimum of disruption to this site. I note that in his report dismissing the previous appeal, the planning inspector noted he did not think Nordy Ring would be adversely affected by the structure proposed on the original site. I'm not sure if he actually climbed Nordy Ring to look at the view across to the Cartway site, but I have, and I can assure the committee that it would have been highly visible from that ancient monument. My concern is that the newly proposed site with its steep track would be just as visible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, who wants to go first? Mr. Parsons?
Yes, I mean, this is a site we've been to previously to look at the original application, which we didn't approve. In my opinion, this new position, as far as the garage is concerned, is much better and is not hidden, but it is less obtrusive than the previous application would have been. And so I'm prepared to support this application.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Councillor Nick.
Just having attended the site visit this morning, and the fact that the site is surrounded by trees on 3 sides, I don't really have any problems with this, and I don't think it will have that much of a detrimental effect on the AONB, so I'm minded to support it.
Okay, thank you. I think we just need some more trees planted over the green once it's erected. There are some open spaces there, and I think with a tree planting scheme and a landscape, I don't have any problem with it.
There is a landscaping condition in the schedule.
Okay, that's fine. So we got a proposal and a second for the application. Do you want to take the vote, Keith? Proposed by Councillor Parsons, seconded by Councillor Christian Nick.
Okay, so we can indicate that you're voting for or against the proposal. Caroline Bagnall.
For.
Andy Boddington.
For.
Nigel Harton.
For.
Nick Hignett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Hilary Luff. For. Nigel Lumbey.
For.
Richard Marshall.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
David Evans.
For.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
Carried, thank you. Next application is Mill House, 3 St Margaret. Graham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of us visited the site this morning. We saw the location, which is within the village of Cleeve St Margaret, which is an attractive stone village with conservation area with a stream running through it. And the stream or brook runs alongside the edge of this site where there is a corn mill, historic corn mill building. Additionally, on there we saw there was a mill house. And nearer to the highway frontage, we saw, or up against the highway frontage, we saw that there was also a bakery building, which I gather was in operation 50 years ago, maybe. But the proposal, we have a heritage asset, and the planning policy support the preservation of heritage assets. There is a proposal for a quite significant extension to the immediate east of the mill house, with an access coming in. I don't know if we can see a more detailed plan, if we just flip them on, there we go. So the northeast side or top right side, we'll see that there's a road access leading in. That comes down to a kind of landscaped area, and in front of that you'll see where the purple and the grey annotation is. We've got the existing mill house building on the southern end of the southwestern end of that. We have a flat modern extension leading to a kind of semi-vernacular extension on the northeastern edge of it. So the actual total area of the historic mill house is fairly significantly increased by about, well, maybe two-thirds potentially. But the point is, as we went out on site this morning, we saw there is a mature hedgerow, which is on the roadside boundary, which completely screens the existing property. There may be a glimpse view of the new extension beyond that, but obviously the vegetation heights can be controlled along the hedgerow as well. the benefits are, and that's indicated by the conservation team, is that this is effectively enabling development which will facilitate the retention and restoration refurbishment of the historic mill complex in comprising the corn mill, the bakery and the mill house itself. If we look at the relevant policies, there is obviously listed buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990 indicates that we have a statutory duty to have regards to desirability, preserving special architectural and historic interests in the setting of listed buildings. These are all independently Grade 2 listed, I would say. But what we also saw on site this morning was that they are in a pretty poor state of repair, with some sort of cracks evident within them. And I think that our conservation officers have acknowledged the structural evidence that has been presented and consider that on balance it is better to secure the conservation and stabilisation and future productive use of these buildings than to, through this enabling development, to allow them to actually go to further decline. I think that is a position of a conservation officer. The parish council position differs. They consider that the building is too large, too overbearing, potentially be visible, is not sympathetic to the conservation area, and there may indeed be problems. I think they're concerned about drainage until the mill pond is completed, at least, because there is obviously, when the original header pond is constructed and the pool is diverted, there will be a kind of change to the local hydraulic surface water regime, and that could lead to flooding. We drove through highway, which was a ford, for about a sustained length of around 50 or 60 metres in the bus, and it was a dry day, so you can imagine that it could get a bit wetter. However, the drainage officer has not objected to this. There are indeed no other consultee objections, and on balance, Chair, officers consider that any effects on heritage are minor and less than substantial, and are fully justified for the end objective of securing the after use and productive use of these heritage assets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Got another statement from Mrs. Watley. And you also covered the next application as well.
Yes, it was 10 and 11.
Yes.
Okay, so I note the parish council's concerns about this major redevelopment of the mill and its ancillary buildings. Whilst I appreciate the efforts to reinstate a collection of listed buildings in poor repair, I am concerned about the scale of the alterations to be undertaken and the lack of information about their end use. The design and impact assessment is quite opaque in this regard. But low-key group of buildings, albeit in poor repair, sit harmoniously within their surroundings, is likely to be transformed into something much more grandeur and out of keeping with the rest of the village of Cleeve St Margaret's, which is characterised by family homes in a variety of styles, but predominantly stone built on the side of the Clee Hills. The proposed extension to the mill house appears at odds with the vernacular, particularly given its proposed flat roof and weatherboarding treatment. There is a danger that the massing involved in both the mill extension and refurbishment of the bakehouse and corn mill will be out of character with the Cleeve St Margaret conservation area within the AONB. I also appreciate that local people's concerns with regard to potential extraction from the watercourse. Details of the treatment of hedgerows, trees, etc. has been highlighted as a concern by the tree team, and further information on the extent of change, remodelling and landscaping would be welcome. Furthermore, I would ask members to consider if they are satisfied that the application conforms with CS5 in terms of making a positive contribution to the landscape, this particularly in the context of the proposed extension to the mill. Furthermore, MD7A in paragraph 6.1.1 clearly states that according to Historic England guidance, rural buildings should be converted with minimal alterations. I do not think the application conforms to this requirement. I would ask members to consider whether this is an acceptable redevelopment, refurbishment, particularly in view of its position within a small, very rural village in a conservation area within the AONB. or whether it is likely to turn out as an overworked, overlarge set of redevelopments which sit at odds with their surroundings. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, sorry, can I just draw attention? I meant to mention that we have a rec in support of this scheme. Right, okay. So we've actually had a couple of them from the same respondent. Is that right? No, that's the same sheet. It's the same sheet. Yeah. Effectively saying that the issues are addressable in summary, and that it wouldn't be visible from the highway and such like. Just draw members' attention to it.
Okay. Right. Who wants to start the debate? Councillor Bagwell, please.
I have to say I was really impressed by this group of buildings when we visited it this morning. It really is very beautiful, and I think most definitely worth preserving. And without some considerable investment, it is likely to crumble away and it will be lost forever. So I think that should be considered. I think the other thing that we noticed this morning, that not only the hedgerow that we felt it was important should be maintained, but retained, excuse me, but also the wall alongside the boundary with the road. There's a wall of some considerable age there that is, I would consider important to conserve. So I would hope that we could make some sort of condition that was done. But I do feel that these buildings need to be preserved, and unless somebody is prepared to put in a large amount of money, then they will be lost. So I think we must consider that.
Councillor Notbury, please.
Officer French said, Graham said that it was 2/3 bigger. If you look at the proposal and the side-on thing, I would say that it's about 130% bigger. Because it consumes the back of the existing house. If it's going to be sympathetic, the back of the house should be there because it's got a beautiful chimney pot and everything. There should be some form of small corridor that goes out, probably pitched, and then you can have virtually the same size house again if you want, so that you've got all your modern facilities, but you've retained all the features of the old one. This is just like a huge hotel bolted onto the side of the house. So I'm sympathetic that we want some proposal to go ahead for this. I poked my head inside the mill, and the actual wheel is still there. It's not big enough to have as some form of accommodation in the future, and neither is the bakery. More likely, if you use the top entrance and then it's got 6 bedrooms, this proposal, 6 bedrooms, that you've actually isolated the other side of it, and you could in the future make that commercial into a visitor centre, but it's too small in the middle of nowhere, so I doubt it. But I agree with Councillor Motley, what's been read out is, as it stands, and the parish council, as it stands, it is far too big.
Thank you, Chair. I did take this upon myself. Actually, I saw it late last night, and I took Councillor Boddington, and we went and had a look at it at length this morning. I do note the concern from the parish council that this could end up out of character with the rest of the village. Given that we went independent, I wasn't sure whether the rest of the planning committee had an opportunity to drive around the rest of the village and do a look around and see how it sits in the landscape. But I think there is a real risk that this could end up totally out of character. For the clay is quite unique. I've never known really anywhere quite like it. It's quite down, down on you. It's, you know, you could be going back 200 years, and many of those properties have not changed very, very little. But I do note that there are a number of properties in very close proximity to this one that have gone down, that are in a state of ruin. So I am mindful that this does need preserving. It is in a conservation area.
It is a money pit, and this is the dilemma where, you know, we've got, you know, having done an extensive renovation, you know, on a farmhouse. It's getting somebody to come forward and to invest in these properties. But there's something just nagging at me and telling me I'm just slightly uneasy what's on the table at the moment. I wait and see what other members have to say. I think potentially we could do with another bite at this, maybe even, you know, deferring. I do remain slightly uneasy, but I do note that this is in desperate need of modernising, but maybe slightly more sympathetic than what's currently on the table.
Councillor Boddington, please.
Thank you. As Councillor Huffer mentioned, he kindly took me to the site this morning and took photographs of the areas that I couldn't actually access with my legs. So that in many ways I've got a very thorough impression of the site. I'm very sympathetic to this proposal. It is a big job, and they're going to have to sink a lot of finance into this because the buildings are decrepit and they're very poor state. Yet you saw the value of them this morning. I mean, they're absolutely fantastic heritage assets. It's really very important, and that needs to be done. To be honest, the only real reservation I have about this application, I'm less concerned about the size than some others, but my only real concern is the flat roof on the extension, which, okay, it's only a small area, but that really doesn't sit very well at all. You know, if that was changed, I'd be fully in favour of this proposal as it is, I think. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak? Can you have a proposed, please, or?
I don't think this really is one for deferral. So I would like to propose that we accept the application, but defer to officers to negotiate the final details of the design.
Okay. Have you got a second for that, please? Councillor Love, yeah. Right. So, is it all right with you too?
Yeah, just to be clear, you're suggesting that we go back to the applicant to seek to remove or change the flat roof element of the extension, and hopefully they'll be accommodated in that respect. But if not, ultimately it would still be approved under delegated powers, or you'd want it to come back to committee if they were unwilling to do that.
I think it may need to come back if they're not going to do that, because I mean it does absolutely jar.
Okay, so yeah, if they're prepared to make that alteration, then and it's acceptable to conservation officers, because obviously that's important here, then you're happy. Just, sorry, Councillor Lumley, I'm conscious you wanted to speak. Graham hasn't referred to as yet, but there were a number of changes, I think, to conditions set out in the additional letters report. So I'd like members to just take those on board and accept those as well as part of the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Bowman, you want to speak?
Yeah, could I just ask that care is taken to include the preservation and renovation of the boundary wall as a condition, please?
Okay, Councillor Lundby.
I just think it's too messy. I think that we really ought to have a proposal that's rejected and that they come back with a better plan. And the reason why we reject is because of the flat roof, because it's out of keeping, it's too large, and come back with a new proposal. I actually think it's too messy as the proposal we accept, but
I think I would support councillor Lambie in that.
Councillor Lambie, you want to speak?
Yeah, I've still got reservations in delegating it to officers without it, at least the parish council and the local member having sight of this. So that would just concern me as much as I would support its renovation. I thought, this is quite unique, and it needs to be done, with a whole lot of sympathy. With the agents and applicants' agreement. I think it might, in fairness to them, if they, to allow them to come back with another proposal, that can go in front of the parish council and then back to us, may be the way forward for this, rather than allowing it to be delegated to officers to try and read our minds, read the parish council's minds on this one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then if that's the case, then your options are to either defer it and send us back with instructions to seek amendments, or to refuse it, and they can then come back. But that's clearly a decision for yourselves.
Right, we've got two proposals on the table at the moment.
If we agree, I think defer rather than refuse. Because I don't think there's an objection in principle.
No.
If there are objections in detail, then I would withdraw my proposal and let let councillor Lumbers be the substantive motion.
I don't want a deferral. I think it should be rejected, but we can make our, as a council, as a committee, clear that we welcome a proposal that is more in keeping with the building, and that it'd be nice to get to less than 100% being in the minutes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Lambie. I think the problem with the deferral is you can defer it and then you can get it come related back to you exactly the same as it was before, which we tried earlier on today. And so I think the best solution is if we're unhappy with the design, then I think we should refuse. So if you're proposing that, I'm prepared to second that.
That's fine. So we're going to propose and second it for. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Design and scale.
Design and scale, yeah.
Impacts on conservation area within the MMB.
Yeah. Yes, we could include that.
Right. So we have a proposal for refusal and a second for that. Can you take the vote, please, Kim?
Okay, if you could indicate whether you're voting for or against the proposal, please. Caroline Bagnall?
For.
Andy Boddington?
Against.
Nigel Harting?
For.
Nick Hignett?
For.
Richard Huffer?
For.
Christian Leach?
For.
Hilary Luff? Against. Nigel Lumbie?
For.
Richard Marshall?
For.
Tony Parsons?
Against.
David Evans?
Against.
7 for and 4 against.
Okay, that's carried to the refusal. Thank you. Right, we go on to item number 12 now, which is Meadowtown.
11.
11, sorry.
10, yeah.
11, so it is 11.
That's the,
Yeah, 11 is,
Yes.
okay.
This is a very quick one, basically. This is the same application. There are 3 listed buildings and there are interventions proposed under the application. As members have resolved to refuse this application, current listed building application falls by the way and can be presumably reconsidered when an amended plan comes back.
Okay. Right, item number 12, proposed dwelling in the southwest of Mintown. Town, sorry. Is it what's it? It is.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application is a full application for the erection of a dwelling
with associated garage, carport and septic tank, and a new vehicular access of land to the southwest of Meadowtown. So you'll see on that plan there, the site is outlined in red. The pink area immediately to the north of that is a former quarry, and you'll see the buildings and the dwellings associated with Meadowtown. The dwellings are actually in yellow, and there are other type buildings, I think I'm correct in saying, other buildings around there. The report before you, Chair, sets out the considerations with regard to planning policy. If I just, sorry, I'll just run through the slides first, and then we can just, there aren't many slides. So that's the proposed dwelling, as you see, sitting in the centre of the site with the garage stroke carport to the south. If we can move on, Tim. That's the proposed dwelling, the design of which isn't particularly an issue and isn't cited as one of the reasons for refusal, which I'll proposed reasons for refusal I'll come on to shortly. If we could just move on, Tim, and that's the design for the proposed garage. I think that's the end of the slide, isn't it? If we could just go back to that one, you'll see from it is a sloping site. You'll see the contour lines there indicating that it's quite a hilly area, but it does sit at the bottom of that slope. The report sets out the considerations, and as I say, it's one where realistically the main and perhaps only consideration is where this sits in terms of the council's adopted policies. Meadowtown is identified as a settlement, part of a cluster is capable of taking some new housing, some new development, but it does stipulate in there that that should be provided by the form of infill plots or conversions of existing buildings. As you will see from the report and the recommendation, officers consider that this isn't actually an infill plot. It doesn't meet that definition, and therefore the recommendation is for refusal. But you will also note that it does have the application does have the support, I think, of the parish council and of the local member. That there are a number of representations which late representations which you will have received, which I need to refer to just to check that members have seen them, because they arrived quite late on in the process. So I think members will have seen, because it went directly to them, some representations sent by Penny Brazenham in an email. Have you all seen that? That was sent 22nd of August, yesterday at 5 to 5, and also a representation from the local member relating to the proposal and support for the proposal in comparison to other schemes.
I don't think I've seen that. I just wondered if I could just read out possibly.
The local member one?
The local member, the one you mentioned before.
Well, there were a number of documents submitted with that. First one is from Mal Fellows, who's a parish councillor As a parish councillor who listened to Mr Jones' submissions at our planning meeting on the 4th of August, I would like to reiterate Worthing Woodshelves PC's unanimous support for the above application and their commitment to encourage young families into the area. Please see below the comments made following this submission. The parish council would like the officer to make note of the design and ensure that the visual impact on the area is a consideration. This parish council is taking a more flexible approach in relation to infill, given the vernacular of the hamlet. And then there are some other quite significant and lengthy documents that accompany that. I mean, it was and yes, one from Worthing Woodshelves Parish Council. This planning application was discussed at the Parish Council meeting on the 27th of June. Please note the above comment is posted on the portal, which was in support of the application, the one I've just read out. The applicant has considered all possible options for development on their own land. That the current proposal is the most suitable location. We've discussed the location in detail and have taken a slightly more flexible approach regarding the infill plot. The property will be roughly in line with the outermost properties of the hamlet, located on the western and southern boundary of Meadowtown. Have you seen the submission from Councillor Kidd?
I didn't see that one.
You've seen that as well. So basically, the comments are all supporting the application and the location. And really, as I say, the crux of the matter comes down to whether or not you consider that this meets the intention of the policies in terms of Meadowtown as part of a hub cluster. It does refer to infill. It does refer to conversion. As officers, we don't think that and believe that it necessarily meets those requirements. But clearly, in terms of principle of some development in Meadowtown, there is not an issue. There isn't an issue around the design of the proposed dwelling. It really is down to whether it meets the policy as it's set out. If we could can we go back one slide, Tim, just so you can see the. No, that's it. So you can see the wider settlement there. I think, Chair, that's all I'm going to say for the moment.
Okay.
I know there are speakers, and I'm obviously happy to answer questions.
Councillor Kidd, if you'd like to come and take to the microphone, please. You're the local member and your 5 minutes to address the committee, please.
Thank you. I haven't seen these before. Right. I have had a huge issue throughout my division on what the council has decided was infill, as Mr. Rogers knows. We have had such a variety of descriptions of what infill actually is. And in my opinion, this is more infill than many of the others that have been given. And if you looked at the paper I sent you, you will have found that actually the one at Bromlow sticks out like a sore thumb, is now being built. There's another one just across the road being granted, but actually is much further out of Bromlow. I didn't think it should have got planning permission, but I was overruled. This one actually is in this community. There are other houses not on that map there that are scattered around there. And this is quite close in. It's near the byway, open to all traffic. There are holiday cottages which you as a committee turned down that were given on appeal by the planning inspector. And this will be the only residential unit that will have been given at all in the settlement over the period of time. And if the local plan goes through, there will be no further building at all in the area because it will be open countryside. My real concern is that if this isn't infill, then we have a whole range of buildings, and I just gave 4, that shouldn't have been infill either. And I think there's a point to be made about this, that actually it's about living settlements. What a settlement pattern actually is. I don't think that plot makes the settlement any different. It isn't halfway down a road on a hillside in the OMB where you can see it from all around. Actually, you can't see this one from all around, and it will be sunk into the ground. I think the papers are wrong in that it says it's 0.9 of a hectare. It's not. It's much smaller, the site, than that, and I think that will be addressed a bit later. So my support for this is around the fact that I do believe it's infill, even if officers don't, because it's more infill than the one in Marton was, where others had been stopped on the edges of communities because it wasn't infill, it was the last property. It isn't like the one in Pennerley that had one house next to it and nothing down the road. That was certainly not infill. And if you look at what has happened in Gravel's Bank was a scattered settlement, and we had one or two scattered buildings put on site there, and then the planners infilled it. So instead of being a scattered settlement, it's now a nucleated settlement with houses that we have created as a planning department. It was never nucleated. So my point here is this sits in the settlement. This is a local family. This is on land that they farm, and there is no farmhouse to go with it. I would still be supporting that, even if it wasn't, because I still believe that this is as much infill as the one in Pennerley, the one in Marton, and certainly the one that's now been built at Bromlow, which is a long way out from Bromlow. So I would urge the committee to actually look at this with some sympathy and support it, please.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions, Heather, please? No. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, Lindsay Fisher, Russell Parry, non-partners.
And the client is asked to speak.
Sorry?
The client himself is going to speak.
I'm going to speak on that, please.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I'm here on behalf of my family. My agents had written me this long speech with technical planning stuff in which I thought they thought would help my application. But I don't want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about farming and my farming family. Because when I do that, perhaps you will understand why this potential house means so much to us. My family farmed in the area for over 50 years. My dad and brother both farm with me, and I hope my son will too. Farming is hard. It's not a job, it's a lifestyle. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We farm, we enjoy it. The plot of Mediterranean makes a fantastic base for me to work from. When I'm soaked through and frozen from the adverse weather conditions, out trying to save animals' lives and our livelihood, I will be able to go home to get warm, dry, and perhaps even fed, even if it's just for a few minutes a day. Living away from the farm just isn't an option. That's why traditionally farmhouses were built to run the farm from. We currently stay on the farm in a small caravan at times of crisis because there is currently no farmhouse. My dad takes responsibility for the farm at the moment, but traditionally the eldest son takes over when he either dies in his boots or hopefully gets to retire. He currently suffers from very poor health and has recently bought himself a bungalow some 20 minutes away to take more of a back seat. I will soon take over the running of the farm, and I need a base to do that from. My wife currently looks after our son, and we've spoken about more children in the future. So being close to the farm allows me to take part in both of their lives. Some days my son might only see me driving past on a tractor. Living on the farm will allow that to continue, or better still, as he gets older, pull on his boots and come out with me. His mum knowing that she is only a shout away. Mediterranean won't suffer from my build. It will only prosper. The average age of the hamlet will be halved. Local blood through young children will be there. We know that the locals, they're our friends. We are friends with them. I see them every day and they are happy for this to happen. I have their support. I've taken it upon myself to get some aerial shots, which I sent you of the hamlet, to show you how sporadic the houses are. They're not neat and tidy. They spill out into fields just like ours would. We plan to reduce the effect by planting trees and shrubs and woodland around our property. We could also move the gateway if the planners thought that would work better. Hopefully, if you grant this application, you're not just letting us build a house, you're letting us build our future. This will change our lives forever, for the better, without having a negative effect on the hamlet. Please granting this application please consider granting this application, not just for me, not just for the family, but farmers everywhere. Just please give us a chance. As was mentioned earlier, there's contradiction to the size of our plot. It's currently listed as a 0.9 hectare site, but it's actually listed as a 0.15 hectare site. Actually, is a measure. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, please? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Excuse me, can I just ask you a question? Sorry, is that okay?
Yeah, well,
Have you got farm buildings near?
We've got farm buildings, but they're literally just outside of that map.
Outside of?
Like where you, sorry, where you've got the scale going down the field, literally on just to the left of that, that's where the farm buildings would be in. But we were advised by Tristan Williams in 2017, before my father's ill health, that that was the proposed site because it was close to the hamlet, because we had sites just out of the, we had 3 other options for sites, sorry, that are just out of that picture. That he advised that that one would be most likely to have success, but then we never followed through with it due to my father's ill health. That were closer to the site, but they were more, less aesthetically pleasing, I should say.
okay. Thank you very much. Right, who wants to? No? Yeah, no, no, okay. Just about, please.
Thank you. I feel like I support it. I feel that it's unfortunate, possibly. I would have supported it if it was nearer their farm buildings even, you know, because I think it's, as in the previous application, we were talking about how you, but as it's where they've chosen, and this is that it's supported by the locals, it's supported by the parish. It is only across the road from other houses. There is a property just below it as well. It doesn't look too far out of the hamlet. So I would support it.
Mr. Barker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm extremely pleased that the applicant overruled his agent and read his own speech as opposed to the technical one. It resonated by far much better, and well done for it. I think it's really important that we do support our farming communities, and especially young blood succession families coming through. And you know, my son is involved in farming, waiting to go off to university, and I see how hard he works. And so, you know, I've got empathy here as well, and it is right. Okay, in the summer it's lovely. When the bad weather comes, farming still continues, and it will be nice just to get back to the house, to be able to change and live a normal life and bring up a family on the farm. At first, I looked at it and I thought to myself, you can't really class this as infill. I absolutely think in this case, for the need of it, there couldn't be a better example of infill, and I will do nothing but support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Bottomson, please.
Well, pretty much following that, the previous 2 speakers, that I support this. I mean, there's a clear need. I don't think it's going to do any damage to the countryside or the settlement, and it is in character with the buildings that are already there. So I strongly support this.
Can I go back into it? Well, the speaker, yeah, Councillor Ignat.
Thank you, Chair. It's not going to bring Meadowtown out of the dark ages, and Meadowtown does seem to form part of a wider community cluster. It doesn't comply with a lot of the planning policies that have been quoted, but I'm fully supporting this for the generations of the future, and the fact that it looks suitable to me, even though there's a steep gradient, looks to be going off in all directions, so you wouldn't be infilling much more of that area by the looks of it, but I would support this infill.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, please.
Yeah, this is hard farming country, where farmers live hard and they tend to die even harder. And all too often, the communities are becoming retirement villages. So unless we strike a balance here in bringing youth into rural communities and keeping them alive, there's a real risk that they will die. I probably got a little bit more experience or lifelong experience in farming than the applicant. And if he wants the easy option, walk the other way. He's not taking the easy option. He's digging down deep and trying to supply a livelihood, whatever that is, for his family and future generations. I think it's an admirable quality. So, you know, I've got no hesitations in supporting this application coming forward. Give you all my best.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Yeah, listening to what everybody said, I'm happy to make the proposal that we go against the officer's recommendations. We do approve the planning application with deferred authority to the officers.
Councillor Love.
I'll second Richards.
Thank you. Councillor Lumby.
No.
After that, yeah.
I just wondered whether there is any way that this could be linked to the farming buildings and the farming enterprise, so that it's not just open, so that it could be just sold on.
Well, I was just going to kind of cover that point because I can obviously heard what has been said in the debate and in the motion. I need to pull it back to the fact that what you're considering here is not an agricultural workers dwelling, and I fully appreciate what the applicants have said and what you've said about supporting farming, etc. You're actually considering an application for an open market dwelling. Now, what you've heard from the local member is that, in her opinion, it meets the criteria required to comply with the policy. So if you are to approve it, I think you need to be clear on the basis that on the advice from the local member, who obviously knows the area well, and from your own considerations, you do consider that it would meet the definition of infill, because that's what Councillor Kidd said, and it has a reasonable relationship with the remainder of the settlement. That's why you're approving it, not because of any farming connection.
Happy with that, yeah.
I'm happy with that.
Happy with that.
Yeah.
Anybody else to speak? I think if I was the planning minister, I'd want every village in the country to take 10 houses and take the pressure off the town and bring village life back to normal. So anyway, we've got a proposal on the table by Councillor Marshall, seconded by Councillor Love. So you put the proposal to the vote, please.
Yeah, subject to any conditions.
Delegated to
Yeah.
us.
Okay, so if you can indicate whether you're voting for or against this proposal, please. Caroline Bagnall. For. Andy Boddington.
For.
Nigel Harton.
For.
Nick Hicknett.
For.
Richard Huffer.
For.
Christian Lee.
For.
Hilary Love. For. Nigel Lumby.
For.
Richard Marshall.
For.
Tony Parsons.
For.
David Owens.
Four.
It's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, we go to schedule appeals and decisions. We've only got 2 this month.
Yeah, okay, Chair, not really, again, not going to say very much, just that there are 2 new appeals lodged there, and they will run their course over time. Our just for members' benefit, our success rate on appeal for this current year is about 75%, which is where you'd expect us to be, 75% success, which is pretty good and meets our targets and is well above the national standards. So just for information, thank you.
Thank you. Right, before I mention the date of the next meeting, this is a bit of a sandwich today, that this is Tim's last meeting, he's leaving us. Then we take you 10 times for retirement. But, he's done a sterling job for all of us, he's been very sound in his advice, and Tim, I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, just to say, it's been a pleasure working with you and all the previous planning committees that I've worked with. But it's one, believe it or not, it's one element of the job that I really do enjoy and I'll miss in particular. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just warn Tim that quite a few of us here try to retire and look at us.
Graham, you're going now.
Don't fall into that.
Well, I'd like to thank Tim and Graham and all the officers for their advice and their expertise today. I'd like to thank you, the members. We had a fair check around the site visits this morning, but I think it was worthwhile. So the next meeting is the 20th of September, 2 o'clock. And I wish you all a safe journey out and thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.